Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jessica Ward King, also known as the StigmaCrusher. And here at this channel, we deal with issues of mental health and mental illness from my twin perspectives as a person with lived experience of bipolar 2 disorder, as well as a person with a PhD in experimental psychology. Sound like your jam? You are in the right place, and we are happy to have you. I would highly recommend that you hit that subscribe button. And also, if you'd like to be notified each week when I post, hit that notifications bell as well. Don't forget to share widely. Mental health affects us all, and stigma certainly affects us all. And with that, I guess it is time that we start stigma crushing for this week. So today, guys, we are going to talk about sex. Does anybody else have a sudden urge to sing some Salt and Pepper? No? Just me? Am I dating myself? That's all right. So we're going to talk about sex and mental illness and how those two interact and what do we do about them. So I can start off by telling you things that I know. I know that I love my wife very, very much. I know that I find her attractive. I know that I long for intimacy and that I enjoy and value sex, particularly when I'm well, but I also kind of intellectually do even when I'm not so well. I know sex is a critical part of my relationship with my wife. And I also know that when I am not well, like I have not been for over a year now, it is incredibly difficult to have successful, whatever that means, sexual relations with my wife. It has been really, really difficult. And it doesn't seem to matter that I know I should be aroused and that sex should feel good and that sex will bring us closer. It doesn't seem to matter. I can't do it. And I am ashamed, and I feel guilty, and I'm afraid. And I know I am acutely aware that those three things, that's the trifecta right there. Shame, guilt, and fear. That's stigma. And you know what? There's a huge amount of stigma around sex and sexual dysfunction. And that's not even when you count the mental health aspect of it. Just sexual dysfunction in general is hugely stigmatized because of what it might mean. Does it mean I'm not a good man or a good woman? Does it mean that I'm broken? What does it mean? Sexual dysfunction is a huge stigma. And when you add mental illness to that, it only compounds it more. So, as you've noticed, this is a touchy topic. This is a really difficult topic for me. And so I am gonna use my notes. You're gonna notice me looking down. Luckily, my eyes are cute today. But let's get into this. Let's have a discussion on this because this needs to be discussed. So sexual dysfunction is like super complex. Sex, to start with, is super complex. We have this idea that it's like one thing, usually an action, a verb, something like to have sex. It's a thing. But it's really not. There's a lot surrounding that whole umbrella that we call sex. We could be talking about one, two, or multiple partners. We could be talking about heteronormative sexual activity. We could be talking about any of a variety. I wouldn't even bother to say homosexual activity because, that's any of a variety of activities as well. Sexual behaviors are hugely diverse as the people that engage in them. And so when we're talking about the way that sex doesn't function, there are just as many ways that it can go wrong. And with sexual health and mental health kind of combined, now you've got even more factors. So what kind of factors am I talking about here? I'm talking about the disorder itself. So mood disorders like mine. Let's say I'm having a depressive episode, which is what I am having. A depressive episode. So if I'm having a depressive episode, chances are that my sexual desire will lower, that my ability to be aroused might lower as well. My ability to achieve orgasm might lower, along with that lowered mood, along with fatigue, along with anhedonia, so not finding anything appealing or enjoyable. All of these things, they mix together and they, result in this kind of, in my case, mood disorder related sexual dysfunction. If you're looking at the other side of my mood disorder, however, so I have bipolar 2 disorder, where I spend most of my time in depressive episodes, but spend some of my time in hypomania, so moderate highs that also go along with, so they go along with higher energy, they go along with less fatigue, they go along with more feeling that things are enjoyable. It also goes along with having a heightened sexual desire and kind of an insatiable sexual desire, insofar as that I would harass my wife for to engage in sexual behaviors while I am hypomanic. And I know that in some cases folks have gone outside of even a coveted relationship to gain sexual gratification while they are hypomanic. So yes, I can go from 0 to 100 in like 10 seconds flat, going between a depressive episode and a hypomanic episode where there's such wildly differing sexual dysfunction. And then the other piece here is, and I won't belabor my situation too long, but this is lived experience. So the other piece is when I am intended to be euthymic, which means normal mood. Everything's supposed to go back to normal. You've been depressed for over a year, but now all of a sudden just everything's supposed to go back to normal. For me, I find that my sexual function is like the last thing that seems to go back to normal. I can, spend all of this time getting rid of my anhedonia, getting back my energy, getting back my desire to pursue different activities, and yet, my wife's sitting there going, okay, there's this last really important piece. When's that going to come back? And I'm like, I don't know. So even though I'm euthymic, I may not be fixed. And there are a variety of reasons for that. So here I am busy talking about the actual disorder itself. And not everyone has a mood disorder, but with all psychiatric disorders, there are going to be changes in sexual functioning. So it'll depend very much on where you're at and what you're living with, what your lived experience is. But along with that, of course, goes the medication induced effects. So if you are one of the folks who have decided with your care team that medication is right for you, those medications, so for me, I know antipsychotics, antidepressants, and mood stabilizers all have some level of sexual effects. Never are they, it's going to make it better. Never. And so that is a conversation that you may have to have with your care providers and your care team. What are the medications that I can take that can improve sexual function, better over this one that I'm on, let's say, like you're saying, okay, you know what, this is a really important part of life, and I need to have this in my life. So how can we change the medications to maybe make it so that it's possible to have and enjoy sex? There's also this kind of psychological sexual effects. So talking about, if you were having mental illnesses, we probably have psychological function that could be optimized by perhaps therapy, or things that are just not working quite so well for us. So that could be anything regarding how you see your body, how you see desire, how you see sex. It could be trauma related. related sexual or psychological effects. So if you are struggling with trauma, that's obviously going to come into it. Another thing that's really important here is the idea of fertility. So fertility can be, a huge thing. If you want to have children, if you don't want to have children, if you're worried about your sexual health, for example, any of these things will really affect your relationship with sex, and can be, absolutely huge game changers, regardless of mental health or mental illness. So those pieces are all there. Then we've got the physiological sexual effects. The body works or doesn't in certain ways, which will be affected by your illness, which will be affected by your medications, which will be affected by your psychology. But it's also worth pointing out that the body will do certain things, and some of those things cannot be helped by your other situations, your mental illness and your medications and so on. And then finally, there's the piece about relationship dynamics. So let's say you're me and my wife, and you've just spent over a year in a depressive episode, and counting, by the way, for anyone that is counting. And so let's say we do get out of it. Does that mean everything goes back to normal, back to, teenagers? No, unfortunately, it does not. So there will have been changes that have taken place in your relationship during that time, in your relationship to your spouse and sexual activity, and whether people should even try. It's really difficult to not feel as though there is a rejection involved when sex is involved. It's really difficult if you're not able to have that level of sexual activity that you are desiring for yourself and or your partner, not to feel as though there's a certain level of rejection. And that will be damaging further on down the line. It'll be, how long have you spent in your drought, as they say, and what effects has that had on your relationship and on your ability and desire to be sexual with one another. And so sometimes this requires having couples or counseling or therapy, simply because all of those changes that have happened, not necessarily that your relationship is failing, but rather that there are changes there, psychological changes and relationship changes that might need addressing. So, I think I went through that quite fast, but that's mostly what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that there is so much stigma about all of this stuff because of what it means about what people feel about themselves and their prowess and their ability to satisfy their partner. And whenever we have stigma, this fear, guilt, and shame, that stops us from talking about it. It stops us from wanting to deal with it. The fear is there because, there's a very real fear that maybe your partner won't want you anymore. Maybe you don't have a sexual relationship anymore. Maybe I've worried about this. It's probably not terribly reasonable, but maybe I'm never going to work again. And then if that's the case, what happens to my relationship? All of these kinds of fears are very real, but they prevent us from moving forward and trying to have those conversations with our partner and maybe get the help that we might need in order to have the sexual lives that we want and we deserve to have. The stigma will keep us from doing that. And so I guess I want to say there needs be no stigma. There is no place for that here. There are a variety of reasons why sexual dysfunction would happen with mental illness, and none of them are just a complete and utter non-starter. There are ways that we can go about getting the help we need for those things. So that's what I want to talk about sex this week. Next week, I'm really excited. So I'm going to be doing my Mother's Day event and with my son's assistance in talking about what it's like to be a mother and to have mental illness. So another poignant one, but definitely one not to miss. And I look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye.
Stigma Crusher.